ICQ Podcast, episode 419, Quansheng UV-K5 SDR review. Well, hello fellow amateur radio enthusiasts, and welcome to the 419th episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, supported by our monthly and subscription donors. In this episode, we join Martin M1MRB with Chris Mike 0 Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin Mike 0 Sierra Golf Lima, Frank Kilo 4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel, Bill Whiskey Charlie 3 Bravo, and Leslie Golf 0 Charlie India Bravo to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BRY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is the Quansheng UV-K5 SDR review. Well, as always, it's our wonderful monthly subscription donors that provide us with the base to provide you with your amateur ham radio podcast show without adverts, and we'd like to thank them for their support throughout 2023. You can set up a donation similar to those as a New Year's resolution for 2024 by visiting our donation page, which can be found at icqpodcast.com/donate. We'll say whatever value you show for our show is fantastic and greatly appreciated. Right, now we're going to join Martin, Chris, Martin, Frank, Bill and Leslie to discuss and generate thoughts about the latest amateur ham radio news, including Ofcom's consultation statement and WRC 23 update. As always, hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to this episode's News Roundtable for episode 419. And just as we roll up towards Christmas here in the UK and over there in the States for you guys. Tonight, I'm joined by Mr. Chris Howard, M0TCH. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Martin. Good evening, guys. And yeah, it's starting to get chilly now, isn't it? Winter is underway. Christmas is around the corners. I guess this might be our last episode, is it, Martin? For at least this crew, anyway, for the year.
Yeah. Well, you and I have had the club quiz, so that was good.
We did.
It was a sociable event, so I'm sure you'll talk about that later on. Always trying to get me into trouble. This side of the pond, we have Mr. Martin Rothwell, M0SGL.
Can I just say, you just mentioned to me, like, as we roll around to Christmas in the UK and in America, you know, I know it's not celebrated everywhere, but Christmas is more than just a UK and America thing. It is a worldwide thing. But good evening, nevertheless. Hello.
Yeah, well, I mean, I talk to Phil quite regularly, and I talk to quite a few VKs quite regularly on the talk group. And when they tell me, like, it's 40 degrees, and I'm thinking, you can't have Christmas at 40 degrees.
They have Christmas dinner on the beach in Australia. It's what they do.
Yeah, I know.
It's hot. It's a hot country. It's the middle of their summer.
Yeah, Phil tells me he has to go down the beach of a night time to cool down.
Their Christmas cards look very different to ours.
Oh, I've not seen one, but maybe one.
No slowy skiing scenes.
Yeah. Yeah, true. Moving to the side of the pond, we got Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH. Hi, Frank.
Hey, Martin. Hey, everybody. And it is getting to be Christmas season because being from the state of Georgia, we have received our Claxton fruitcake, which is a local delicacy that ships worldwide. So it's looking a lot like Christmas here.
Yeah, I knew it was like Christmas because Mrs. B's been getting very harassed. She gets very worked up at Christmas. So my best way is keep out of the way, Frank. Hi. Also, your side of the pond, we have Mr. Bill Barnes, WC3B. Hi, Bill.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Martin. Thanks for having me back on. Since Frank mentioned fruitcake, I don't have the fruitcake story to tell, but I do have a story of my soldering iron's been getting a lot of work fixing LED lights this year. For some reason, I've had a lot of issues with wiring. So my soldering iron has been getting quite a workout.
All right. That sounds interesting. I'm trying to avoid that wherever possible, Bill. And last but not least, we save him to last because he always gives us a good laugh. It's our Leslie. It's our Leslie, G0CIB. Hi, Leslie.
Good evening, Martin. Good evening, all. And yes, I know the Christmas season, and I've got to spend some money, and it's against my better natures. And yeah, well, what can I say? Good evening.
Yeah. It's It'll all be over in a month's time anyway, Leslie. So just under a
I
month.
prefer people to be miserable than they're happy.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I said that with tongue in cheek.
All right. Okay. Well, let's say we'll all be relaxed in about a month's time, and it'll all go well. Right, let's see what we've got tonight for our news roundtable. News stories, and there's some good ones tonight. First news story for us this episode. Ofcom have given us a statement on the amateur radio consultation document they sent out to us. So a lot of us filled in this website, and it looks like most of what they offered we're going to get. Chris, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, I can do. So we talked. This was the big news story when we were over in Friedrichshafen back in, was it sort of May time this year, when the Ofcom announced the consultation, and I think a lot of us, I certainly responded, saying pretty much, yeah, everything you're suggesting, I think it's a great idea. I agree with everything. Please go ahead. And they've now that consultation, I think, closed in September. I think, can't remember now exactly the timeline now, but they've now published the kind of results of the consultation. And from what I can see, well, I've not read through the entire document. It looks like everything that was in the proposal has been agreed. Look, don't quote me on that. There may be some small points that haven't, and it looks like there's going to be a phased approach to the changes. Some things happening in February next year, some things happening later next year, and then there are certain things that will be planned for 2025, possibly, when they put a new licensing platform in place. All very positive. I agree with everything that's being proposed. So it's more power. There's a whole bunch of things. We talked about it on a previous episode, so I won't go through them all now. But yeah, it's very positive for UK amateurs. Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing I quite like about it is that they have tried to certainly clean up the amateur radio documentation and bring it more into line, which I thought was quite good. I read the 47 pages of this document, which they're talking about. Yeah, if I'm being honest with you boys, there are certain sections, if you're going to read it, you read it multiple times because they put the same paragraph in under different sections, so you can jump forward a bit quicker. Leslie, what's your thoughts?
Honestly, Martin,
Yeah.
bring it on. Right, first of all, I'm going to say that they're on Essex Ham. They've done Pete Seppel has done a really good video on this, and there's also a summary on their website of the changes. And as has been quite rightly pointed out, there's stage changes, most of them occurring in February 2024. The only one that was slightly different was that the foundation holders was originally for 20 watts most, and I think it's been changed to 25 watts to most bands. I also did a small sort of test thing on my Radio Club WhatsApp group, and I said, here guys, here's the changes, this is what's occurring, tell me what you think. And I had replies from Tom Dawson, who's into aeronautical mobile, so he was absolutely delighted on the changes of that. Peter Hone made some really interesting comments. Tom give me some comments as well, and some Chai. I'm sorry if I got his name wrong, but overall, from my local radio club, it was all thumbs up. Let's kick some of these archaic rules into touch. If you want to run 1,000 watts and you're in a sensible location, and you're able to do it, and if you're in a built-up location, you can't do it, but you've got to be sensible about it. Why not? Why not? Bring it on. Thank you, Martin.
Yeah, I agree with you, Leslie. And there's some good things in here. I mean, I like the one where you can spend more time with the public and let them have a go.
Oh, yeah, that was especially one. I should have picked up on that. That was where you can have a non-licensed holder use the set, but under the direct supervision. I think that will be great, because what we don't want is members of the public looking at people's backs. We want them to get involved, and provided it's under supervision, who cares? It's great. Good move. That's me done.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, let's keep it in the UK just for a second, guys, over the pond. Mine. This is going to affect us. As I say, you and I live in built-up areas, so there's no way we're going to run a kilowatt, but...
No. Well, first thing is like, woo, my burner's legal. No, I'm only kidding. The main thing I take away from this, obviously we have the you can let other people use it. I'll be honest with you, I thought you could do that anyway to some extent. They talk about greetings message, but certainly clubs and things like that, I'm sure that we're allowed to do that in the past under a club call sign, but I guess it's under your normal call sign, so yeah, great. I do wonder, will it's, because a lot of people go for the higher licenses because they want more power. Obviously it's an incentive, 10 watts, 50 watts and 400 watts. You go to the next level up because you can have a bit more power, and that's, a lot of people, it's an incentive. Are we going to see a lapse in people going for the next level up of license because the foundation suddenly 10 watts is okay, but 25 watts, it's a bit of a difference if you're trying to do something. The intermediate, suddenly you can run, what is it, for 100 watts for an intermediate? Well, most HF radios only do 100 watts. So is there going to be less people going for the advanced license? And then the only people that really want the advanced, going for the advanced, are the people that genuinely want to run stupid amounts of power. I said it before, I don't want to work my neighbour's toaster. I can run, my ARRL will handle, I think it's documented to handle 400 watts. I've never put more than 100 watts into it. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think I ever want to put more than that in my home area. If I was going to, as you mentioned, if you're out in the middle of nowhere, if you're up in, the top of a hill, you're in the Scottish Islands or somewhere like that, then yeah, that's one thing. But I'll be honest with you, do you need that amount of power when you're up there? I don't know. But, overall, I see it as a good thing. We're bringing the licenses more into line. We're bringing, we're getting rid, as Leslie said, getting rid of some of the archaic things that have been there. And, massive kudos to Ofcom for proceeding with this and, bringing us into line with things.
Yeah. But also, I think what you're saying is, why would people? Well, power's one thing, but there are a lot of things that haven't been mentioned in this change, so I assume they're remaining as is. But things like you can't run a special event station or organise a special event station unless you're a full licensee. You can't operate maritime mobile unless you're a full licensee.
What was the thing? If there was a mention about you can set up a repeater without an NOV.
Yeah, but it's less than 5 watts. But
yeah, it's all changed.
XP is less than 5 watts anyway.
Yeah, but the problem you're going to have with that is you're never going to be able to do that. I couldn't set up a repeater at my house on UHF because half the cars in Carshalton would never get into their car. They'd never be able to.
But you could do it on 2 meters, and the thing we had to do to prove that there were frequencies available on 2 meters to do it. There's nothing to say that someone couldn't just say, okay, here's a frequency, I'm going to stick a repeater on it and be done with it.
Yeah. It's an interesting one. I think I'm going to wait and see how that goes. The catch-all is going to be you're not supposed to cause interference, and if you may be able to set up a repeater and have the rights to set up a repeater, but if you don't meet the rules of not causing interference, I think that's where...
Martin, this is where the RF assessment comes in.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you're running high power and you ain't done your assessment, you ain't got a leg to stand on.
But what about RF interference to another repeater around the corner, or a repeater that's down the way that you can't necessarily hear but can talk on their frequencies?
What you've got to show is what steps have you taken, and that's the first question they're going to ask you. If you turn around and say, "No, I'm not bothered with all that nonsense," you're done.
Yeah.
If you can say, well, actually, or this is what I've done my assessment, I made sure it was all this, I've done this, and even if you get that a little bit wrong, that's fine.
You've
because
tried.
You've actually shown you've
done
put the effort
maths.
in. You've done your maths, you've done the paperwork. They will the 99%, 99.99%. They will go absolutely fine. They may pick you up on a little bit. That's good. If you couldn't be bothered, you're done.
Yeah,
certainly are. So yeah, that's some good stuff. Now I'm going to jump over the pond. Bill, you've got most of the rights. We're a bit being given here in the UK. So we're kind of coming more in line with yourselves. But what do you think about this?
Well, that's my initial reaction when Chris sent this out, because I actually got from Chris first, by the way, and then you sent the articles out. But I want to reiterate what Leslie said, because that's the true essence. If you're going to run any power, and it really doesn't matter how much power you're running, you could be running milliwatts, you still want to run the assessment to make sure you're not hurting yourself or hurting your family or hurting your neighbors. By doing the assessment, you got that paperwork, and you have to continually, I update mine every year. I haven't really changed that much stuff around here, but I still refresh it every year so that I, have evidence that, hey, I looked at this in the last 12 months. That's really critical. But the new call sign rules, well, there's a lot of stuff in this thing from Ofcom, but the one thing I that picked up on me is you can use regional secondary locators. Like if you're up in Scotland, you use, at the M, throw another M in there. But if you forget to do that, you're okay. You're not going to get in trouble now, which I thought that was a really good idea. Because people, I'm sure people forget. Here's one thing that I want a little bit more detail on from our friends across the pond. New applicants will only be allowed to hold one personal license. So that means you only, like, if you're you only have a full license. You no longer have your intermediate or.
No, I can answer that.
Okay.
Right. Let's say you take your foundation license and they give you a call sign. Then you take your intermediate and they give you. No, hang on a minute. You're getting 2 or 3 call signs here. What they're saying is you can only have one.
Okay.
So I've got one personal one. I don't have my old B license anymore. That call sign's gone. So I'm only holding my own personally one call sign. I also hold 2 club call signs, and I think that's changing up to 5.
Yeah, that I saw that in the document, that club licenses will be able to up to 5 call signs.
Correct. You can't personally have more than one call sign.
What about existing licenses? For example, I've still got foundation and intermediate licenses, and they're call signs that are registered to other things. If I give up those call signs, there are things that are tied to those call signs, like QRZ, not just QRZ, but Echolink logins and things like that I still use.
Yeah.
Because they're legal call signs. Someone might get my call sign a year down the line. Why can't I have that? Because it's already registered, mate.
You're going to lose it, Martin, as much as you want to spit the dummy on this one.
I'm not that worried about it, but you're just wondering what's going to happen with it.
Yeah.
There is a way around it, and what you do is you set up a club, and that club will hold the call sign. So you personally don't hold the call sign. Do you get that?
It's all right, Martin, but you'd have to sign up with the RSGB and have the insurance and everything to be a club. So
they're not getting the money. They haven't done any work for it.
Yeah.
The other thing I noticed here,
on a personal basis, it will be one call sign only.
Yeah. The other thing I noticed in there is the intermediate licenses will no longer be issued as the 2 Echo call signs. They'll now be M8s or M9s.
That'll be an interesting thing for new intermediates coming on calling CQ, won't it? Because they're going to be like prime call signs for people to try and work.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. I'm not sure what the deal is there. And then they're also going to do something that I think is a great idea, and that is they're going to do a new platform for tracking all this stuff through Ofcom, which they're going to do an online platform and hopefully update that thing. And they're going to let you change your call sign.
Get a list of existing call signs and what's free.
Yeah, hopefully. It doesn't say that, but I would hope so. Now, the one thing I wish we had, and Frank will know about this problem, is you'll be able to change your call sign periodically, but you'll be limited to once every 5 years. So what happens here in the States is there's a small minority of folks that snag up every possible extra class call sign they can get through the vanity call sign system, because that takes them out of use for 2 years. So they'll change their call sign like every month, just to take them out of the pool so other people can't get them. But limiting that to once every 5 years definitely will keep that problem from happening. So that's something I hope we get. But overall, as I read through the document, I read through the summary, and I read through the document, it seems like this is going to be nothing but pluses for our folks over in England.
Oh, yeah, I think it will. Frank, have we left you anything to say on this one? I'm sorry, we've been quite long on it.
Oh, no. It's been a great discussion, and I've, as our friend Leslie would say, I've been listening with interest. So, a couple of observations, and I think Bill picked up on this. I was very pleased to see what I'd call the modernization of the database and the data system. I think that can only be a good thing for us and for them, because if you don't have a robust licensing database system, then those who don't laugh, but those who are obligated to do enforcement, then they're suffering too. So I think this will help marginally on the enforcement side as well as from the consumer side. And Bill just pointed out the notion of being able to change your call sign. I know there is a privacy, a set of regulations that your address, your licensing address is not made public. Over here in the States, they have to be able to get a hold of us. Bill, I think it's what, in 2 weeks or something that we have to be able to technically respond to them if they contact us. I may be off in 2 weeks, but
yeah, I believe you're correct. 14 business days.
So I use those to geocode hams, and coming up in January, I'll download first day of January, I'll download the circa December 2023 slice of the current licenses, and I'll geocode them, put them on maps. And I'm interested in seeing where hams are. I really wish I could do that in the UK, but there are many roadblocks to doing that. But I think having a better system will have those benefits. I think the group has thoroughly thrashed out, hey, we can get a kilowatt. Yeah, okay. You can, but do you really want to? And in our rehearsal period, I had asked about manufacturing, and apparently kilowatt amps are available anyway. So I thought there might be a little blip in what manufacturers do. I was also, and I'll end with this, I was very impressed with the review process and how it went. And thus far, there has not been a great negative response, from the ham community. Over here, we'd have different groups just, this is terrible. No, that's great. So I was very pleased with the process.
Yeah, I agree with you, Frank. And in fairness, there have been some people that have said, I disagree with this, and some people have said, I disagree with other things. One of the things I heard that really a lot of people wanted to disagree with was that foundation license holders are now going to be able to build the stuff themselves, which was always a no-no before. But they still have to make sure that they do it properly and they conform. And if you don't have the skills to do that, then you shouldn't be doing it. So they'll get caught very quickly if they create problems, or they'll
Can
be
I ask
told.
another question on foundations, Martin?
Go on.
I'm sure it's foundations, possibly intermediates as well. I had it in my mind that they weren't allowed to use reprogrammed PMR gear. I had a feeling it was either only intermediates and advanced that could do that, but I know a lot of foundations did. Is that still a thing?
Well, that really is true up until probably February next year. You weren't supposed to. So technically, because it's not got a proper CE mark, a Balfang UV-5R shouldn't be used by a foundation license holder.
Yep.
If I want to really go pick the fight.
I think it depends on the particular model, Martin. I think there are some that the new ones do have a CE marking just to
Martin, can I
spheres, but yeah.
Can I put my
Go on.
There was something. Now I'm just trying to rack my brains on this. There was something at some time about kits and foundation holders. I can't remember what.
It was,
Yes.
yeah.
I can't remember what the exact wording of it. It was so long ago.
So
So
foundation license holders were allowed to build kits providing they were type approved kits, but there were
Yes.
never any type approved kits on the market. So
what we did at the local club is we got a load of Pixie kits in, and they made them under direct supervision and under the club license. So
that's a way around it. Yeah.
I personally checked that they were working good, and they actually learned a lot by making them. And okay, and then they got stuck in the cupboard and never seen again. But hey, that's what we did.
Yeah, fine. There's ways around it.
Yeah,
that's exactly what I was going to add, Martin. You just stirred up the hornet's nest here, but they let the foundation folks build kits, but I believe there was only like one or two that from QRP Labs that were. He actually went through all the problem you had to go to get that certification, and all his new stuff he gave up on it. But at the same time, of all the learning tools that we have to work with new folks, nothing is as effective as is building a kit or building a radio from scratch and I was incredibly pleased that they are dropping that so that these folks can get into the hobby part of the hobby.
Yeah. To be fair, you've always been allowed to build the kits, you're just not allowed to use them.
Yeah, and it was only
true.
It was only the transmitters you weren't allowed to use on air.
Yes, true. You could build as many receivers as you wanted in iPhone boxes.
Yeah. So all in all, I think we're all very pleased on this one, and I'm looking forward to February coming round, which fits in with something else I'm doing. I'll tell you later on. But looking good. Move to our next news story. WRC 23, the week 3 update. 23 SEMS isn't going to get taken off us. I think that's a result. Bill, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, everybody was holding that, or everybody that uses 23 SEMS was holding their breath. Worldwide, where amateurs are secondary on that band. This is the 1240 to 1300 megahertz, aka 1.2 gig. There was a proposal out there, ITU recommendation M.2164, that was I think would be incredibly difficult for a administrator on the various governments to actually be able to enforce, because it had really strict power limits on portions of the band, and then not so strict power limits, and then some medium power limits depending on where you were. I mean, there was just way too many. I think they made it way too complicated for most of the administrations. So the compromise that came up with for WRC 23 was the authorizing administration, upon receipt of a report of harmful interference caused by a station of the amateur or amateur satellite services, shall take all necessary steps to eliminate such interference rapidly. So basically that leaves everything back to your local, for you guys it'll be Ofcom, for us it'll be for FCC, but they get a complaint, they need to, do something about it. And a lot of times a conversation, I think, is gonna resolve this. In some part of the band, they were proposing that if you're over a certain, pointing up in the sky over 15 degrees or something like that, you're okay. I mean, crazy stuff like that. But when you get an actual complaint and you investigate the complaint and it's a legitimate complaint, I think that conversation is going to go way further than these crazy rules that they're proposing to the 23 SEMS band. So, in my opinion, we got the best that we could possibly expect from this conference on that, which is good.
Yeah. It's just a note at the bottom of the band with what they want us to do, which is rather than taking half the band off us. Frank, are you a 23 SEMS operator or one you've not played with?
Well, I have the capability. I have an ICOM IC9700, and I have my 2 meter and 440 megahertz antennas up in my loft. I have a set of stacked 2 meter halos and the 440 halos. I'm still yet to put up a 23 SIMS antenna. I've been looking for one. It would probably be used with digital modes only. So, no, I'm not technically a user. I was aware of this issue, and I can just imagine ICOM doing a big gulp if we lost 1.2 gigahertz. I'm not sure what the manufacturing impact would be, but it sounds like this has been a very reasonable, adjudicated process. We just have to be careful, like we've talked about with the Ofcom on power. You have to be careful if you've got a full gallon kilowatt. You have to be careful with whatever you're using, and this sort of falls in line with this. And it sounds like a reasonable process to me.
Yeah. Well, at least with our 9700s, at least we can use them on 23 SIMs. I mean, Martin, I know you and we haven't done it for a little while, must do it a bit more often, but we often used to have a quick natter on 23 SIMs as well, didn't we?
There are loads of people on 23 SEMS FM. There are probably 5 or 6 in my immediate area that I can work with 10 watts on a vertical white stick on my chimney. It is amazing, and it's like the 4 meter band. You just get some really, really good contacts on there because people are so delighted to talk to you on there. Well, I say with things like this, you can take bands away, and I've said it before, but you can't necessarily stop people using them. I don't use it. I did when it was legal, but I do often see people still talking about using 934 meg CB on social media. I bet Vodafone must love them, but it's it happens. And I obviously, reading this, I thought, 23 SAMs, it's prime real estate. The broadcasters want it, cellular want it, and I take away from this, from reading this, after 4 years hard work, basically, they're saying don't cause interference to other people. Isn't that the case with all bands, whether we're primary or secondary anyway? I mean, I don't know who the primary user of 23 SEMS is. I mean, is it radar? I mean, we get enough interference from them, just watch the TV repeaters and things like that. But, either way, we were worried about, potentially losing it. We're not going to lose it. We just can't cause interference to people, which, to be fair, is, as far as I'm concerned, you don't cause interference to people anyway. So yeah, 23 SEMS is a great band, and I always say use it or lose it. So if you have 23 SEMS, a lot of people have got the ICOM 9700s and things like that now that come as standard with 23 SEMS. You don't have to buy a second module for it. Just put up an antenna, get on the air, call CQ.
Yeah, well, that's what you and I do. And in fairness, if it does affect Galileo's satellite, I was thinking about it while we were talking. I'm guessing that there will be certain manufacturers that make receivers that won't be as tight on the front end. They'll be wide open as a barn door. But in fairness, if somebody's driving around with a Galileo satellite in their car and I'm transmitting, the chances are if I interfere with them now, I'll never know about it and they won't be in the area.
If someone's driving around with a satellite in their car, it's kind of in the wrong place because it's supposed to be in the sky. But if they're using like the GPS satellite, at least the comforting thing to know is that if you are causing interference to that as long as the people that are trying to track you down are also using that satellite, you're absolutely fine. Just keep transmitting; it's fine.
Yeah, no.
And I don't condone that before anybody emails in.
No, I know you don't. But equally, as I say, yes, you're right. I meant satellite receiver, not a satellite in your car.
Have you got a satellite mounted in your car? I wonder what that was.
Yeah, I've got
people driving down the road, people chucking their tellies in the bin.
Yeah, there you go. Chris, I know you don't have 23 SEMS, but what's your thoughts on this one?
I don't, but I'm glad that we're not losing it because you never know. I might want in the future. I'd like other amateurs to be able to use it as well. So, no, I think this is great news. It's well done to the IARU and the national societies that have done a lot of work in influencing this decision. I think, as per what Martin Butler was saying, I don't think there's actually a change, which is good. Essentially, sensibly, it's don't cause interference, and if you do, then you got to stop doing it, I suppose. But no, well done to the guys. I know Barry Lewis, G4SJH, they spent a lot of time on this, and it sounds like we got the right outcome. I know we did interview Barry, didn't we, on the podcast a little while ago, so it sounds like all the hard work has come to fruition.
It was a good one. Now, Leslie, I know you predominantly only do HF, although I do know you creep up onto 2 meters and 77s occasionally. But what's your thought?
I do occasionally. HF is prominent. That's what I like playing with. Bit of VHF, a bit of UHF, and I have been seen now and again on 4 meters. But anyway, I've been listening with interest in this. Like I said, I don't use 23 SEMs at all, but I have been listening with interest. I did actually write down use or lose, but somebody used that phrase before me, so yeah, everything has already been said. So I'll move on from that one, Martin.
Yeah, no problems. As I say, it's good news we're not losing big chunks of it. It's good news that we're going to coexist. So that's quite a good one. Now, the next one, I ripped off Dan Romachek's blog, Dan KB6NU, and he'd looks like he got it from Reddit. But there's talking about a club in the States that gives away old CB radios to kids to just go off and play with. And they're saying within about a couple of years, the youngsters, most of them have actually got amateur radio licenses, which is an interesting way of doing it. Frank, what's your thoughts?
I am here to say, here, do it and do it some more. Many and some in the ham radio hobby have an attitude about bah humbug on CB radio. When I was a teenager, I had CB radios. I had a post in the yard. I had a 5-element Yagi. I used to sit on top of that post and tune it because I wanted, I was learning and stuff. And I had a 500-watt amplifier from Palomar. That's why I became a Palomar engineering customer over here. I learned to dip the grid and adjust the plate. And I talked to South America at noon. That was back during a really, really, really good solar cycle. That was that and listening to AM radio at night. Those were the two things that energized me with regard to radio technology. And in 6 years, I had built 2 radio stations with other people's money, an AMer, daytime AMer, WXLX in Millersville, Georgia, and an FMer at the college I was attending. It was WXGC. It's now WGUR. They're both still around. Call signs have changed in the AM radio. So it really energized me to get engaged in broadcast radio. And later in life, I became licensed as a ham. So I was delighted to read Dan's blog post. And I just think this is just a great thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, we do all sorts of things. But Martin, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, we've got to give a shout out to dankb6nu.com if we're nicking up his content. But yeah, well, do you know what? Giving CBs to young people in the area, that's the idea. I think is great. You're giving them the way into radio. A lot of us on this podcast and a lot of our listeners have come through CB. I got a CB in 1993, and when I was 13. And then I obviously progressed, and I'm now fully licensed and stuff. So it is that was after the heyday of CB. So it is a very good way to get in. You learn stuff, as Frank says about you learn about tuning antennas. You understand why 4 watts on HF with a short antenna on the roof of your car doesn't go very far. Whereas nowadays, I can talk to someone, via a repeater on the other side of London with 2 watts on a handheld. I do have concerns about this. I don't think this would work everywhere, because certainly if we were to give CBs to youngsters here and in certain parts of London, there are channels you could go to that would have conversations on that perhaps wouldn't be appropriate and that wouldn't be the best advert for two-way radio communications. I'm not saying this of every conversation, because I do still use CB. I've got more into it recently because there are more decent conversations going on. But you tune around, you still do get some conversations that perhaps don't promote the hobby in their best light. But either way, if it works, great. It can only be a good thing. We did this a while back, a similar sort of thing. You can see when we did JOTA, we gave like the PMR 446 radios to the scouts. So we set up an HF station, and there were like one or two that were interested in there. What's this about? But 446, I mean, God, anybody in that area that was trying to use 446 for business, good luck to them that day, because the 446 channels just went absolutely wild. But it's a way into the hobby. Fantastic.
Yeah, well, I'll clarify once again for our American listeners, because 446, I believe, is the UHF calling frequency.
Oh, FRS, family radios, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, no. In the UK, we have a thing called PMR 446, and there are some frequencies, now 16 analog frequencies. There used to be 8 around there, and we gave them to the scouts. It was a great afternoon, wasn't it, Chris?
It was that day. It was fantastic, yeah. And it was great to see, actually. So we kind of handed them out, and they were all on channel 1, I think. And a couple of them worked out how to change the channels. And it's actually not that easy to do. It's not obvious. You don't just press a button. It did require a few button presses. They figured out how to do that, and they were chatting away between each other. So, yeah, it was very good. In terms of this CV idea, no, I think it's a fantastic idea. The only thing I would say is maybe give them out to more than one person so they can talk to each other rather than talk to the wider, because I mean only because they may not find anybody else to talk to. That so I had a CB many years ago, and we were just playing with it. I think it's before I got into amateur radio, and not long before we got into amateur. I think we realised that me and a couple of friends realised that actually CB wasn't really, didn't give very good range, etc. And that's when we got into the hobby, into the amateur radio hobby. But perhaps if you got a few spare CBs, had them out to a number of the youngsters so they can talk to each other. That would be my suggestion. But great way of learning about how radio stuff works and just kind of generate some interest. It's a great idea.
Yeah, and before everybody gets upset, it's radio. It's people learning and using and understanding radio, whatever the radio is. Okay, we do a bit more technical stuff, but doesn't mean to say others can't get enjoyment. Bill, what's your thoughts?
Relatively agree with the others' comments so far. I did like the story of you guys doing the PMR, aka FRS radios with the scouts in the past. I think that's a little bit more interesting. And then it's an interesting concept. I mean, there's definitely a lot less CB activity than there used to be. Maybe this is like a gateway drug. Get them hooked while they're young, and they'll come back and get their licenses. Maybe, I don't know. At this point, I don't think there's very many bad ideas at this point to try to get people involved and active in the hobby.
Oh, no, I agree with you, Bill. And the last rally I went to, Cats, at the end of the day, I'm walking around, and the guy said to me, "Yeah, everything on the table's £1." And I looked there, and there was one PMR 446 transceiver. Now, if it hadn't worked, it wouldn't have worried me because it was £1. I'd have had more enjoyment fiddling with it for a little while. But I put it home, stuck a couple of batteries in it. It works perfectly. Now, what that means is, when we do anything with the public or whatever, and the scouts again, if it gets broken or if it gets lost, I'm not going to be that upset. Yeah, if they lost one of my nice Yakusu or one of my nice DMR radios, yes, I would be upset. But yeah, something for £1. It's going to give a lot of us a lot of enjoyment. So that's where I think. What's your thoughts, Leslie?
I think it's a great idea. I mean, come on, what else would the equipment be doing? Stuck in a cupboard collecting dust, never to be used again? No, give it away. Let them use it. Great. Yep, some of them aren't going to carry on. It'll be a fun day, but they won't carry on with it. And others will decide, yep, that's for them. And I did laugh about Frank's thing about the valves. There is a little ditty on peaking the plate and dipping the grid, and that goes a long way back. And I was asked to do that the other day on the set. But I thought, how do I do this? But going back to the handheld things again, I have a a silver one of these camera boxes, which when we have our camping functions, it's got some cheapy radios in that whoever's on the campsite can take them, and if they get broke, I don't care, because they're so cheap, it doesn't matter. And they can have fun putting stuff over trees and whatever. But that's what we do at our camp, and it works absolutely great. So I think this is a good idea, and thank you for the story, Dan. I think it's great.
Well, there you go, Dan. Good story, and we agreed. Show radio, which is the important thing, I think. Next news story, and I really like this, and that's why I put it in. But the ARRL RF Safety Committee develops a new guide to communicate RF safety, and I looked at it and thought, this is great. The idea of this document, and I know others have been produced in the past, but the idea of this document is to give the amateur the chance to read these, so you've got all the right answers. If your neighbour suddenly turns around and said, your transceiver's just sterilised my cat, or your transceiver's just blown my kettle's fuse, stupid things that people always want to point the finger at us for. There's lots of good answers in there. Now, I'm going to ask you to go again first, Leslie, on this one, because I know you did some work for the RSGB on this in the past. What's your thoughts?
Well, I had a look at the document, and basically it's a guidance document. And I think these things are actually a good idea, providing, and this is the providing radio amateurs actually read them and follow them. There was one case I know where that happened, and there was an awful lot of expertise and knowledge being put into producing a leaflet, and it wasn't. The radio amateur said, "No, I'm not going to do all of that," and they lost, and they were shocked that they lost. And well, the argument was, well, if you'd follow the guidance, you would have had a chance. I do know that the RSGB produced one in 2009, and the Ofcom assessment thing came in 2021. So we were the RSGB. I was a team of people on there. They put together a leaflet that gave very, very good advice on what to do. And this is a similar document. I would add that although this is sort of general principles and ideas, a lot of it is not technical. A lot of it is to do with your relationship between your neighbours and your local authorities. If you get that right, you've got a very good chance. If you sour that, you've got no chance. So it's about getting on with your neighbours, being friendly, doing what the local authority asks. And this is a guidance document in the right direction, bearing in mind that there is a difference between the regulations in America and the regulations in the UK. In America, there's a thing called OET 65, I believe, and they're continually there has been updates to that. So what I would say is that when you're looking at this, look at what the latest documents say, both in the US and in the UK. So that's everything from me, I think. Yeah, that's everything from me, Martin.
Yeah, we'll say good document. Bill, what's your thoughts?
I'm going to repeat a few things that Leslie says because it's really important. He's right. This is a guidance document. It gives you a good basis to start the conversation. The fact that they started off, on page 4 saying you must have a properly performed exposure assessment before talking to your neighbor. Yes. Absolutely. And then they give you a lot of guidance here on how to explain what amateur radio is. They give you a lot of things to consider as you're talking to the person. And, one of the interesting things that they bring up in the document is a rather common thing at least I'm trying to find a nice phrase, not the phrase that's thrown around here in America all the time, but it's folks get caught up in unreliable information from a source that they think is reputable, but is actually not. And they talk about that in 3 paragraphs on how to go from those angles and exactly what safe means, which is always good, because the reason why OET 65 has been updated over the years is because we still are learning how RF non-ionizing radiation affects tissues, soft tissues of our body, how it affects the DNA, how it affects when cells divide. I mean, they're feeling pretty good about the science, that they're pretty close, but we all acknowledge that science is a continually moving wall, and we're working with the best information we have right now. And just from my 32 years of amateur radio, and I mean, I was worried. I got my first RF burn, months into the thing. And I'm like, I got to be more careful about this. And the fact that we're to the point now where we have good guidance on how to evaluate your stations and good guidance on things like grounding, earthing, or whatever term you use for common bond. We've gotten better information over the years on what different frequencies do to you when you get too close to them, and how to determine the RF field strengths in a way that is repeatable and useful. So I really, really like this document. I'm really glad the ARRL RF Safety Committee developed it to help pretty much everybody worldwide at this point. It's a good document, and I encourage everybody to it's 11 pages. A whole page is just references, so it's actually 10 pages. Very easy read. And I think it's very helpful for everybody everywhere to at least read it once so that they have some understanding in case these things do come up.
Yeah, I agree with you, Bill. And that's why I thought it was worth putting it in this episode of the podcast, because it is such a good document. Frank, what's your thoughts?
Let me focus on the frame. I think Bill repeated some of what Leslie had to say. Leslie's had direct experience over in the UK with it, and I think Bill did a great job in kind of framing some of this. Let me add a little frame on here too. As hams, we have some guidelines for ourselves. We have a station assessment. We've had that process over the last couple of years, and as Bill has reiterated, we need to do a safety assessment. That, while it involves other people, it's kind of our activity as a license holder. We have to do that. Okay. So what is this document? Well, it's for us, but it's to help us. And Bill didn't mention conspiracy theory, and that's sometimes a misaligned phrasing, but people get unreliable information. They hear, well, I know somebody whose eyebrows fell off after they drove by a cell phone tower 3 times in a row. I heard gets into the never land of being devoid of science. And as Bill said, science is a moving wall of what is scientifically acceptable best evidence. So this document, now here's my frame. This document is for us to interact with our neighbors about in terms of RF safety. Let me make a nominal distinction between RF safety and radio frequency interference. We should put on the good neighbor hat if our neighbor says, I'm hearing you over my stereo speakers. And if you look at the product plate of that stereo, it will say the magic phrase, Part 15. We all know that by operating a Part 15 device, they accept all interference. But it's not the best foot forward for us to merely point that out and say, not my problem. I'm licensed. You got a Part 15 device. Go away. We all should try to work with them on RFI and try to help them. Some neighbors can be difficult. I'll be first to say that. Now, this is about safety, and so how to explain the sterile cat phenomenon, as Martin put it, is a touchy thing. So why did the ARRL do this? There are all these other, as Bill put it, unreliable sources about RF, stuff we can't see with our own eyes. And so the ARRL has done a very good job by putting this out, because it's something we can draw upon and say, look, my national organization has got these guidelines. Let me just share with you what the latest is based upon good engineering practice and what we know about soft tissue. I don't know. You may convince 80% that things are okay, and that 20% you'll see at the courthouse or something. Who knows? But I think the ARRL has done a very good thing for the community to help us communicate reliable current information about RF safety and what we're doing and what it is not doing to them.
I agree with you 100%, Frank. They've done a good job here. Yeah. Okay. Come over this side of the pond. Chris, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's good. I think any guidance you can be given, any advice you can give is all for the good, isn't it? I know, obviously our expert here is Leslie, and I know that RSGB produced EMC, and it's obviously more about, I guess, interference, but also RF safety guidance. We now need to, as has been said, we need to do our own assessment now in the UK, which is a good idea. And whatever guidance we can be given, we know we're not all experts in this. We do a little bit about this to get our license, but this is safety stuff, so it's important. So I think it's good that we get more information. We should all learn and know as much as we can about this subject. And of course, we'll get questions. People will ask, "Oh, you got an ARRL? Is that going to, as Martin was saying, sterilise my cat?" So if you've got information you can refer to or show people or be knowledgeable about and get that confidence, and that's a good thing.
Chris, can I just add one point? That when people talk about RF assessments, they sort of jump up and down and make lots of noises. But if you use the RSGB one, and I'm going to use that one as an example because it's quite good. If I was to sit down with somebody and go through the RSGB one, we could have it done during a cup of coffee. It is not onerous. It's actually quite straightforward. There's some basic things you need to know about your station, but you can have it done in about 15, 20 minutes easily.
Absolutely.
And then print it off and just get it done. So I don't accept
mine off the website while you were talking.
Thank you so much.
And I think there is actually a connection between this and an earlier story. We talked earlier about Ofcom and the giving us more power. Well, I'm sure that relates to the fact that we now do a safety assessment.
Absolutely.
The fact people have to do it. Okay, you can now give someone 1,000 watts on the assumption they can do it safely, and they have to do that safety assessment. So now it's much more rather than based on, well, we're going to set a level that means everyone's reasonably safe. It's now going to be based on, well, actually, you need to go away and prove you can be safe. So, it may be technically your license allows you to use 1,000 watts, but only if your RF safety assessment allows it.
Yeah, it's good. Martin, have we left you anything to say on this?
Well, there's a couple of bits. Frank made a comment there. So I hear you over my stereo speakers. If my neighbour said that to me, the broadcaster in me would say, "Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you don't want to hear me, change the station." That aside, I did actually, something like this, I could have used a while back.
Do you have any musical request?
Yeah, we can play you a song, play you a jingle. Yeah, that'd be great. I did have someone actually when I lived with my ex that did complain about my antennas, and they actually went to it was a rented house, and they went straight to my landlord. They didn't talk to us; they just went straight to our landlord and complained about an antenna, which was nothing more than a collinear on a tripod in the garden. It was a completely temporary structure. It was even behind the house and behind the chimney, so you wouldn't even see it unless you went down the garden and climbed up and over the fence to have a look. And something like this would have been absolutely really useful when it came to explaining it to the landlord as to what was going on. I mean, in the end, I came up with all sorts of things like I want this guy to take his satellite dish down when he's finished watching TV, and I want him to remove all the strings from his tennis racket after his game. It's ridiculous to expect me to take something down from my garden that's not bothering anyone, just because he doesn't, like me. But a document like this would have been, absolutely brilliant in explaining what things are, to the landlord. In the end, the landlord completely sided with me and told him to jog on. But this is something, as Chris mentioned, obviously now we're getting more power in the UK. Maybe Ofcom need to be working with the ARRL to, get this information and perhaps share this information, or get a UK version of it produced that can be shared as part of your license, because there will obviously be a license update that comes out, because obviously any changes that take effect only take effect once you revalidate your license, as is my understanding. When you revalidate your license, there will be more guidelines that come out. And before anybody says, oh, join the RSGB, not everyone's a member of the RSGB. Not everyone is going to get that information. That information needs to come out via Ofcom. Now, whether the RSGB write it, whether they borrow the ARRLs and update it, that kind of information, I think, should come from Ofcom as part of a license update, or just a reference, say, hey, for more information on this, go to this website or this link.
Yeah, not a bad suggestion. But yeah, as I say, we're all agreed that we really do need to do these assessments anyway. So that's good news. All right, I'm going to move on because this one's going to be a long one, guys. Moving on, next news story. HAMSCI releases first solar eclipse findings. Now, I know that you're a member of HAMSCI, Frank. You might not be involved with this, but it's good to see that information is coming out. It's not just us feeding information into a black hole, isn't it?
You're correct, Martin. I am a scientific member of HAMSCI. I have not been involved in the solar eclipse research, but let me just comment and heap praise upon Dr. Nathaniel Frissell, W2NAF. Nathaniel leads the HAMSCI effort and has an advisory board with some good folks involved there in the directory. And as I'm one of two statisticians on the HAMSCI team. What they did correct and did well was they organized the data collection part for people who voluntarily monitored and collected observations that were within sort of scientific boundaries of how we should do this. That was point number one. Point number two, after that got in fairly quickly, some of the early exploratory data analysis, as you'll see in charts and graphs and things, over a time period, you can begin to see the effects. And I'll end with this to leave others some bandwidth themselves. We're learning more from a finer point, putting a finer point on it, about what solar physics does to our RF consumption and production, i.e. amateur radio. And we know a lot of general things, but this is putting a finer point on it. And having these data is so very important. We'll have another eclipse, I believe, in 2024. It will be a little different type of eclipse, and we've already been preparing the design of how data will be collected there. So in 5 years, once the data have sort of been thoroughly thrashed through and sort of made available to others, we'll know a lot more. We'll know a lot more before then, but I'd say just give 5 years as a window that we'll have a much better sense of, hey, we've got a solar eclipse coming up. Here's what it's likely to do and on which band. So good on Nathaniel and doing the work that he's doing at his university and leading this volunteer group.
Yeah, as I say, good news that they're actually giving us some of the data out, or giving us some of telling us what's happened. Chris, what's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I remember we talked before, didn't we, about this before it happened, and they've now got the data. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm always slightly what's the phrase, cynical, whether or not during a solar eclipse it's very quiet because of something that happens. I remember years ago when I think we were on board HMS Belfast, and there was a partial solar eclipse that was due to happen while we were on board, and we were listening on the radio, and it was very quiet. But of course, that's either because so there's something happening into propagation because of the eclipse, or everyone's gone outside to look at the sky and they're not on the radio. So I do know that they were sort of trying to arrange some sort of testing during this, and hopefully it's led to some useful information for the scientific world.
Yeah, let's hope it has. Martin, what's your thoughts?
I'll be honest with you. I'd love to see more on this. We don't have a link to it that can scout through some of the information, but I'd love to know more. As Chris says, is it gone quiet because people are outside watching? I wonder if there was any data that they could get based on stations that were on air all the time. For example, broadcast stations on medium wave and FM and things like that. Or even shortwave stations, could they get any data from things like that? Because obviously they are continually transmitting. But if it's a solar eclipse or something like that, like Chris said, I'd be outside watching it or just experiencing it. I remember the full eclipse we had back in 98, 99, something like that. Everybody went. Whatever you did, things just stopped. People went outside and watched it. But I'd certainly be interested to see more about what they found out. That's for sure.
Yeah, certainly would be. Leslie, you any thoughts on this one?
Well, unfortunately, Martin, the article was only sort of 2 paragraphs. I would like some meat and some understanding of and some more detail on it. So I'm with the others on this. Let's see what happens. I was just cashing at the bit for more technical stuff, but that's where we are at the moment. So I'm sure we'll get some more information in due course.
Actually, looks like someone's just posted the link into the show notes there with loads more data.
Can I put the link out at the same time?
Thank you.
Haven't got time to read it in the time of this news story, though.
I will have a good read when I get a moment. Thank you very much.
Yeah, in fairness, when this came out, that was all it was, and I thought it was worth mentioning because of the fact that we are getting information back from them, but they wasn't telling us much more about it. Bill, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, that's why Frank and I posted the link. This is from the October 14th, 2023 annular solar eclipse across North America. And I'm surprised they're already, I'm really impressed with volunteers that they're already getting some data out of this. They did a lot of experiments. There were 6 primary experiments. One was, first one was, of course, the solar eclipse QSO party. Then they did a grape high frequency Doppler experiment at the same time. Whisper daemon observations, which that's the one I did. I put up the whisper beacon on 20 meters I have. The medium wave AM Doppler experiment, the high frequency time difference of arrival experiment, the TDOA experiment is the abbreviation for that, and the very low frequency and low frequency experiments. And the document that Frank and I posted out here goes into, basically all 6 of those plus the other ones they're looking at. There was an obvious effect to the ionosphere during the eclipse in the area that was affected. Very interesting how that works. Likewise, in the article, they put out a call for the next one, which is April 8th, 2024, which that's the one where I'm deciding if I want to actually go up to Lake Erie and get a boat. Because that's one of the areas that the eclipse is going over is Lake Erie, and I thought that would be kind of cool to be in a boat and watch an eclipse for once. Because Martin is right. Eclipse happens, everybody goes outside and looks at it. I mean, the last time I had one here, I had the kids building solar glasses, and we had a big party and everything because it was, one of the rare times that Pennsylvania got a total solar eclipse. And I still had the whisper beacon running for that one too. But the point being is there's a lot of science here yet to learn. And it's very fascinating how quickly it changed the ionosphere just for a few seconds of eclipse. Very fascinating to me.
Yeah, as you say, very fascinating. And it's all part of our hobby, and we're still learning, which is one of the things that keeps all of us interesting because we always learn something new. Right, last news story. Frank, you slipped this one in on me, a few days ago on the email, and then I almost missed putting it in, so I was a naughty boy. But the title is First Light. NASA receives laser beam message from 10 million miles away. So I read the headline and I suddenly thought, hang on, are we talking about aliens here? But no, it was more sensible than that, wasn't it, Frank?
It was, and I sent that in just because we've seen in popular movies where there's some space travel part of it, and you'll have somebody up somewhere, Mars or wherever the plot takes them, and they'll send some sort of communication back to Earth, and then a couple of days later they may get a response. So the idea that communication times are elongated, in space travel is a common cultural theme in science fiction that may not be totally fiction. So how do we communicate far distances like Mars and Jupiter? And so NASA received what they're calling first light by using a laser light communications. Now, we've already done some of that here on terrestrial comms. We've used light to communicate. So yes, friends, it is radio. And so this is the first time that's actually done this. So it's an interesting story. I'll stop my comments there. And it's on CNN. And so it's sort of gotten international news organizations' attention about this. So it will probably continue to be covered by them off and on over the next few years. So I'll pass it on, Martin, to our other presenter.
Yeah, okay, Frank. That sounds a good one. This it's interesting. Communications by light. Bill, do you want to go next on this one?
Yeah, I'm just going to echo what Frank said. It's radio because it's light waves in a vacuum, so it's going as fast as it possibly can go in the universe. But it's 10 million miles is far, so that's really good news. It's because that's one of the challenges of deep space is the further away you get with traditional radio, the narrower band you have to use for the signal to make it that long. But maybe with doing it with the optical stuff here of light, we will be able to send large data packets across the distances that we will need in a way that we can actually get some science from. For instance, I'm going to pick on one possible target, Mars, and then go from there. I mean, it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, and what a phenomenal distance, 10,000 miles. Well, a massive distance, 10 million miles, which I should have said. Leslie, I know you're an HF man, and I always say this to you, but this has got to be an interesting one, hasn't it?
I was trying to get this around my head. That hang on, we're on a ball, and the ball is spinning, and we're firing a laser signal from a moving object to 10 million miles away. This just blows my mind.
You've got a point.
I was thinking, if you're half a percent error, you won't communicate because you'll be millions of miles off.
Do you think NASA are telling us porcupines, Leslie?
I don't know. I was just thinking of the logistics of that, and I'm thinking, hang on a minute. Let's get a picture of this in my mind. What's occurring? And it's just done my head in.
Well, Leslie, I can confirm it isn't April the 1st, so you're all right.
I guess it's a different way of looking at circularly polarizing something, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, Martin, what's your thoughts on it then?
Well, the first thing that sprung to mind, the film Contact with Jodie Foster, and of course at the start of that, she was playing with ham radio, and then they got messages and things from Alien. It is, yeah, to mention, I think what Bill said, it is radio. I did see a YouTube video of someone actually playing music between two mountain peaks using infrared light through an overhead projector lens. That in itself blew my mind, and that was just between a couple of mountain peaks. I'm not even going to pretend I understand the logistics of this because, as Leslie said, we are a moving object. We are turning around. How are you going to do this? I'm guessing that we have fired a signal out and heard it come back, rather than this being, a little green man or woman sort of sitting there calling CQ, shouting 59 next, much QRM, or, talking to you about your car insurance. But the thing that gets me is if you're firing like a laser or something into space, the amount of stuff that is there that is in space, not just space debris, but stars and everything else that is out there. The further you go, there is more likeliness that there is going to be something in your way that you are going to hit. Are you saying that the closest thing that we could hit was like 10 million miles away? That's, it blows my mind.
I think the thing about space is it's quite big. And 10 million miles actually isn't, is actually quite close.
Yeah. And the answer to Martin's question, this was a technology demonstration satellite.
Right. Okay. So it's a satellite that broadcasts back to us then.
Yeah. Okay. They launched out around the moon, it looks like, and then over the next 6 years, they'll go out towards Mars and Jupiter and yada yada yada, and see how far we can go with the signal.
I have heard of people picking up signals from things like that before. But the other analogy I was thinking of is if anybody's done clay pigeon shooting, you're moving because the Earth is moving and the clay pigeon is moving. So you've got to, your beam has got to sort of track each end. Like I said, that just blows my mind even thinking about how to do it over those sort of distances. But I do recall somebody doing something. I think it was Venus, one of the things going around Venus, and he picked up a signal from that, and it was that complicated, and I couldn't understand it at the time, and like I said, I was trying to put in my mind a picture on how it was done. Hey ho.
Yeah. Well, Chris, last words on this one?
I mentioned that, space is big. Just as an example, a few months ago, I was out in the garden and saw this quite bright light in the sky. I thought, I wonder if that's a planet. So I got my binoculars out, which have on a tripod, and it was Jupiter, which actually blew my mind. We've actually been able to see the rings around, not Jupiter, sorry, Saturn. I actually see Saturn's rings. I thought, blimey. And so I came in and had a look on the internet and see how far away is Saturn. It's something like 900 million miles away. And I'm like, that blew my mind. I could actually see something that far away, through binoculars. Then I was thinking, well, okay, so if someone sent a signal by radio from somewhere that far away, and I think Mars isn't quite as far as that, but it's certainly in the hundreds of millions of miles away. If someone was sending a radio signal from that far away, and that does happen, we have space probes. NASA have sent out space probes that have gone way beyond, right towards Pluto. I think I'm right in saying, and that's obviously even further out. How long does that take for that radio signal to arrive back on Earth? And it's certainly, a number of seconds, if not longer. So you've got to think, well, how on earth do you can't remote control something with that sort of delay, because by the time it's got there, the thing's moved and it would be impossible. So there must be a certain amount of automation or a certain amount of intelligence within the systems on these spacecraft to be able to do things for themselves without requiring input from Earth. But then you think about the wider space and other stars and other planets that are, light years away. Well, you think, well, if it takes light a year to get there, how on earth are we ever going to communicate with them? So, that absolutely blows my mind in terms of just how big space is. So, even though 10 million miles, let's face it, is a long way, if you think about the size of space, it's actually really pretty close. But it's phenomenal just how what's out there and how far away things are in terms of you think about space, and really planet Earth is just a speck in who knows what's out there. So anyway, I've gone slightly off topic there, but still impressive we managed to do with 10 million miles, and absolutely we're starting to push those boundaries, and we'll see where things are in a few years' time.
Mars is 225 to 401 million kilometers away from Earth, depending on where we are in our orbital patterns. And the two spacecraft you're talking about is Voyager 1 and Voyager 2. They've left the solar system. And as a matter of fact, JPL was advertising for somebody that could write assembler code to update the software on Voyager 1 and
Right.
Voyager 2.
Imagine the bandwidth, all the latency you've got trying to communicate with
Both
that.
of those spacecraft have like 70K of memory. It's something insanely low. It just blows my mind.
You have
And
to
but they
turn it onto the terminal onto it or something. That would be very slow.
Yeah, well, what they've done since the 70s is when pieces of those spacecraft failed, they would take that code out of the code on the computer, and then be able to, for instance, use a different program, the like other sensors are still working to do different experiments, and then ship the data back to Earth. So that's how we got a lot of the data on passing through the heliosphere. They actually sent a software update to change, what was it, Frank? The magnetometer, and there's two instruments they had to change.
I don't recall, Bill, but yeah.
Yeah, one was the magnetometer. I remember that, and there was something else they had to. Oh, the temperature gauges, to be able to record as it went through the waves of the heliosphere, so that it actually, as each one of those spacecrafts exited our solar system, they actually got real measurements of the solar winds coming in and out. Very fascinating accidental experiment with those two spacecraft that required a software update, 15 billion miles away or however far they're away.
Clever, very clever stuff.
Gents, I just checked up because there was some story about Venus, and it was at the back of my head, and I was doing the Google search, and I found that in 2009 there was AMSAT DL actually did an EVE, which was round trip of there's 31 million miles.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. And
Yeah, I remember that now.
It is a delay of 5 minutes. And they did that on I haven't been able to verify this. It was just something at the back of my head said it had been done. And they did that on 2.4 gigs. Absolutely amazing. But yes, it has been done before. But hey, you need to. It's a different league from me, I can tell you.
Yeah, so what we're saying is 100 million miles would be well over, 5 minutes? It'd be well over 15 minutes.
Yeah.
About 18 minutes. Yeah. The delay. So, So 36 minutes round trip if you were bouncing the signal and requesting that. Oh, dear. Yeah.
And Martin, it's just a story of another successful QRP operator.
Very true. Very true. Oh, dear. That's great fun. Right, that's the end of our news stories. Let's find out what the guys have been up to since the last time we spoke. Going right to left on my sheet. Bill, what have you been up to?
Been very busy the last couple of weeks with work. We had a few things go on that required a lot of extra hours, but I'm past that now. In November, I was able to work station on HF in Yemen, which was the first time I've heard Yemen on HF in probably a decade. So that's reassuring. I also was able to work a few stations on the ham radio workbench on the air event. That was the weekend of, I think, the 2nd and 3rd. Let me look at the calendar. Yeah, 2nd and 3rd. I worked Smitty and 6MTS, VE6LK. Oh, my brain just went blank on his name. I've talked to him before, and I've worked Thomas. Vince, yeah. I worked him on CW, and I also worked Thomas K4 SWL on CW. And Thomas was in a park, and VE6LK was in a park. So I also got some POTA contacts out of it. But that's it for now, for this month. Now, this time of the year, I usually bring this up on the podcast. Holidays are coming, so usually there's activity on Boxer Day, for instance. Get on the air, call CQ. The largest RIDI contest will be the first full weekend in January, which this year is January 6th and 7th, and that'll be the ARRL RIDI Roundup. So if you've never worked a large, insanely popular digital contest, that's probably the biggest of the year. And so that's one I always recommend folks to at least jump in for a few minutes just to see what it's like. Pretty much everybody's radio now can, at least of the newest stuff, can do audio-based frequency shift keying, aka run it through your sound card, like you do with FT8 and all the other digital modes. But you'll be able to chunk through that, and it's an interesting contest, and I always seem to get a lot of DX out of it. So that's all I've been up to at this point.
Yeah, sounds good, Bill. And unfortunately, we got notification of the Workbench guys doing their on-air system after our last podcast, but I know Colin put it out in our newsletter, and we wish them well. Frank, what have you been up to?
Continuing some stuff I've been involved with, but got into some new things too. I'm continuing to work on my wireless antenna rotor. That's where I've taken a gearbox motor and placed it in a PVC tube to mount on a painter's pole, but I want to operate it with a wireless key fob so it can change directions from clockwise to counterclockwise and change the speed. And that's a difficult one to find circuits for. I found a commercial product in Illinois a manufacturer makes for some other purposes, and simply bought one. And I'll work on, once I get that working, I'll work on how to do it, with more of an open source thing. Right now, I've got it about done. I'm working on the Arduino and magnetometer hat and programming that to have a Wi-Fi access point so you can bring it up on a phone or tablet or a PC in a browser and see what the bearing of the antenna will be. I'll figure out a C-clamp or something that I can pop that little box onto the, probably just below the boom on the vertical shaft that comes out of the motor. So that's getting close, and that'll be for portable ops. It's certainly not heavy duty enough for that. So still at the workbench doing some work there, and I'll get on to the monoband Yagi designs after I get the rotator working. One of my local clubs that I'm working with over in Vicksburg, Mississippi, I'm the program chair this year and will be for next year as vice president. We hosted Gordon West, WB6 NOA, through Zoom. Gave a great talk on what real emergency traffic on amateur radio sounds like and how hams responded. He had some actual recordings of hams from Mississippi, and particularly the Gulf Coast area back during Hurricane Katrina, and how those responses were handled. That talk is on the Vicksburg ARC YouTube channel. I've mentioned in earlier podcast I had picked up a SDR knockoff of the one by Chris M0NKA a few years ago, the RS918 SDR QRP transceiver. I almost sold it. It's one of these things that's a hot rod. You have to get under the hood and you have to spend a lot of time learning how to calibrate it and stuff. And I almost sold it. But working with John in 5ID in Blytheville, Arkansas, he's done some YouTube videos to walk through the calibration and setting steps. And after looking at them, John and I have corresponded, and I sent him some test equipment, frequency counter, tiny SA, and a oscilloscope to help his workbench because he's doing such great work on this. And so I've gotten my radio calibrated now, and it's working significantly better. Now, Andreas M0FXB, who apparently does not sleep, publishes a couple of videos a day. He's picked up this rig after seeing John N5ID's videos, and he's got a string of educational videos on the RS918 now. He just recently compared it very favorably with the popular Xiegu X6100. So you can see his YouTube channel for details. Cost about 250 British pounds. Andreas says I paid $349 US shipped from Connect Systems here in the US. Now, this little radio will drive a QRP amplifier very easily Works out of the box with WSJTX using one USB cable. Doesn't have Bluetooth. It does have a nice color touch screen, and it is third-party firmware updatable. And Nazar, who is a sort of firmware programmer on the groups.io group for this radio, puts out a couple of firmware updates per week. He often is testing problems that users there have. Now, if you want to learn how SDR radios work, it's worth the price of admission to buy one of these. Go through the process, calibrating the power amplifier, calibrating the touch screen, which is fairly trivial, calibrating the IQ signal, and calibrating the frequency adjustment. Got a frequency counter of any stature, it's terrific. So you'll learn an awful lot about how SDR radios work. So if you buy a Flex or you buy another one, you'll have a much better understanding of what they're doing. Now, to Wax, back in the day, we had a silent key in one of the local clubs, and his wife donated the remaining equipment on a free table at a meeting. And I picked up for free a triplet 630 Type 5 analog multimeter. It was in pristine condition. He was a wise ham because he took the batteries out of it some years ago, so nothing leaking. He had the original manual. So I ordered a 30-volt battery for it for $15 and bought some new probes for it. So I'm really pleased to have and maintain some really good analog measurement tools in my workbench area. I'll still probably use my Fluke when I'm doing real stuff, but it's just kind of nice to keep some of the old gear that's in great shape working. It'll handle high AC current, by the way, which is something my digital multimeters won't do. Now, I will point this out. In the current December issue of Radcom, our CHOTA event that I've talked about in previous episodes for my church here in Ridgeland, it was featured in a nice 2 or 3 page spread that Radcom was kind enough to publish on the CHOTA event. So I'm hoping that next year we can dedicate an hourly 10-minute period for all stations in the UK and all stations in the US to go to a certain frequency on, say, 20 meters and try to jump the pond. Now, finally, my RSGB handbook on USB drive arrived, and I'm reading it now. Very impressive. And great thanks to our colleague on the alternate podcast team, Ed Durant, DD5LP, for serving as editor. So, Martin, that's what I've been up to since the last time I was on.
Well, sounds like you've been busy, Frank. And yeah, I've had my book that Ed edited in the house for about 6-7 weeks now. And I ordered it, and when it arrived, Mrs. B took it off me and said, "You can have that as a Christmas present." So I've got to wait another couple of weeks before I can even open up and have a look. I know it's in the house; it's been wrapped up now. Oh, that's how to keep you in suspense, isn't it, Frank? Hey? Leslie, what have you been up to?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, Leslie, what have you been up to?
Okay, thank you, Martin. Yeah, we've had. I've been trying to recover from the dreaded lurgy that's been going around. But apart from that, we had the AGM of the Silverthorne Radio Club that went very well, and the committee's decided to buy a brand spanking new marquee. And also been doing a few bits and pieces on repairing bits of radio kit around. And I think there's a letter to the editor you might want to have a look at, Martin. So that's all from me. Thanks.
Yeah, no problems. Well, it was a good letter. I remember reading it before you sent it in. Good letter. Martin, what have you been up to?
What have I been up to? I have been doing quite a lot of listening recently. I actually spoke to a couple of truck drivers in America, believe it or not, on their CBs, and they didn't believe I was in the UK. I was literally tuning around, and the EU CB bands were absolutely buzzing during the week. Weirdly, 10 and 12 meters were as dead as DAB radio, but the EU CB bands absolutely buzzing with American CB users, which was amazing to listen to. And it genuinely did sound like Smokey and the Bandit from the 70s. It was awesome. I've been causing loads and loads of HF interference, as have my neighbours, with all those dodgy switch mode power supplies on my Christmas lights. Though I should say I do prefer incandescent bulbs and good old series wiring where you don't have transformers, you don't have power supplies or anything like that. You've seen my house, Martin. You know I've had to make up some more extension leads because I've genuinely run out of sockets. Been on the talk group, been playing with some new digital wireless mics as well from Sennheiser. They're pretty cool. They operate on the same frequencies, but the modulation is digital, and you can fit more microphones into the space, and they sound absolutely awesome. And a couple of other things. I've been watching a couple of videos on YouTube actually recently. There's a guy called Andy Kirby in the UK. He did a video about Meshtastic nodes, which are little nodes that you can pair with your phone via Bluetooth and things, and they run on 868 megahertz, one of the ISM bands that like your boiler timers and everything else connect to. And I said, looking at this, I wouldn't mind playing with some of these. So doing a little bit more research into that. Haven't played with anything, haven't got any equipment to run there, but just out of interest, because it's something that has interested me. And the last thing, I got my satellite dish realigned. Obviously, I have a satellite dish above the gutter of my house, which is just officially lined up with Astra to pick up like the FreeSat TV channels. The old Sky LNB on the end of the arm had failed. The cap had gone, and I drained the water out of it a while back, but it got into electronics. So I bought another one, and I just couldn't align it. And I borrowed that satellite finder off of you, Martin. For the listeners, this is just like an S meter that squeaks when it picks up a satellite, and then you sort of adjust it for the best signal. And it was spot on one satellite, but I could not get it to find Astra at all. And the guy came around with obviously the right equipment. I went up the ladder. He said, "Yeah, you're spot on a satellite, but it's RTL, so it's a German satellite. So basically, you need to go left and down." So why do you go down? He said, "Well, you've got to account for the curvature of the Earth." And it was at that point that it dawned on me what he was doing. Like, oh my God, he said, you want to go left, you go left and down. You want to go right, you go right and up. That's just the way the satellites are, because you have to apply. It's like, oh my God, that would have made so much sense. And he just went left, down, and he go, there you go. And it was absolutely spot on. So mind absolutely blown on that. But yeah, that's pretty much radio for me in the past month or whatever it's been.
Yeah. Well, at least you've been doing some, Martin. No problems. Chris, have you been busy?
Reasonably busy, actually, for me. I've had a little go on HF at the weekend and spoke to some Yota stations. It's Yota month, of course. So, the trip throughout December. So listen out for those stations, and I worked 2 or 3 of those. You and I, Martin, appeared in VADCOM. You remember we had Lindsay did a talk for us, or did helped to do an interview with us on the podcast a few months ago on British Inland Ways on the Air. There was a nice write-up in there, and I sent in a picture of my camper van with an aerial on the roof, and there's a little report about what we did. So that appeared in VADCOM, an article that Lindsay put together. I have got a new handheld. I know you have the same one, Martin, a Quansheng, which is quite interesting. You can play with the firmware on it and change some of the features, so that's quite cool. So been playing with that. I know, Martin, you've got the same one. You've been doing something similar. And also, I've been playing with the new version of SDR Connect. So SDR Play, I think, launched their SDR Connect, their new software, back in August. Or should I say a preview version of that. They've just released a new preview version. I think it might be mentioned actually on the previous episode of the podcast that they brought out the second preview release. Been playing with that. Works very well. It's got some new features. It's got some bug fixes. You can go on my website and see what they all are. But it works pretty well. So quite pleased with that. So that's probably about it for me, Martin. Oh yeah, and at the Radio Club, we had our Christmas quiz a few days ago. So that was fun. So we had got the couple of other local clubs to join us for a bit of a festive get together, so that's always fun to do. So that's it from me, Martin.
Yeah, well, say you've been busy as well. Me, not so busy, guys. I'm sorry. I've done some 2m70 SEMs. I've been playing with a handheld, and more about that, which I'll cover in the feature, because I talked about what I've been up to with that. But I have had quite a few contacts on 2 and 70 locally. and also been on the talk group. It's not the busiest of talk groups, but it can be fun, and I need to be on far more than I am, but I'm hoping that things will quieten down and allow me to get and do a bit more. Like you, Chris, I've been playing with a new version of SDR Connect, but I run it up on a Raspberry Pi, one of these little Raspberry Pi 400s, and I've not got particularly good sound on mine. Now, it could be the USB speaker that I've got connected. I'm going to try a different speaker system, but my Raspberry Pi has a Bluetooth speaker on it, and it doesn't sound particularly good coming out of that. But that's probably me, because I'm sure the SDR boys wouldn't have released it if it wasn't working properly. So all in all, not a lot from me, apart from I promised to do a bit more. So all that's left me to do now is thank the guys for joining me today. Unfortunately, Bill's had to skip because he's on a hard stop. So I'd like to thank Mr. Frank Howell, K4FM8.
Thank you for inviting me, Martin. Always a pleasure.
No problems, Frank. I'd like to thank Miss Leslie Butterfield, G0CIB.
Thank you for inviting me, Martin. It's been great as normal.
Yeah, it's been a long one, but a good one. I'd like to thank Mr. Martin Rothwell, M0SGL.
I'll be honest with you, I was about to drop as well, but yeah, thanks. It's been fun. Have a good season's greetings to all of our listeners, and yeah, we'll see you next time.
Yeah, catch you soon, Martin. And last but not least, I'd like to say thank Chris Howard, M0TCH, for joining me.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. Thanks, guys. And we'll see you all on episode 421.
Yeah, we certainly will. Right, I'm going to say 73 Stuart, and we'll continue with the rest of the podcast. 73, guys.
Cheerio.
73.
73.
For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
Now it's time to have a look at the news in brief from me, Colin M6BOY. We start off with news in North America, where a new question poll has been released, and this is for the extra class syllabus, which comes into effect on July the 1st, 2024. Now, the document is available in both Word and PDF format, and there's some extra graphs as well that are included in both file formats. Maria Soma, AB1 Foxtrot Mike, who's a member of the committee, said the new poll incorporates significant changes compared to the 2020-24 version, and we carefully went over the poll for technical accuracy, relevancy to today's amateur and radio practices, grammar, style, format, clarity, and redundancy within and between the poll. With these goals in mind, 82 new questions were created, 101 questions were eliminated, meaning that the question pool has reduced from 622 to 603 questions. 350 of those were modified, basically to make improvements to wording, answers, or to remove distractors. So this question pool will take effect, as I say, from the 1st July 2024, and will run through 4 years to June the 30th, 2028. So as always, we'll put up a link on the ICQ podcast webpage for you to find out more information on this. A proposal being submitted to the European Space Agency by AMSAT UK, the British Amateur Television Club, and AMSAT North America, with inputs as well from the UK Microwave Group, for a geostationary microwave amateur payload with a planned coverage at least part of North America. The proposal was submitted after a recent conference, and they've secured €250,000 worth of funding to investigate the possibility of this payload. The proposal is to cover all of the European Space Agency members and cooperating states, and they say they're looking for ranges from Cyprus at approximately 34 degrees east to Western Canada at approximately 141 degrees west, and lays out an example coverage from 3 slots: 5 degrees west, 30 degrees west, and 47 degrees west. The amateur radio and educational payload will consist of 2 5.6 GHz uplinks and 10 GHz downlink transponders, one at 250 kilometers wide with 20 watts of output for narrowband such as SSB, CW narrowband, digital modes, and 1 megahertz wide with 20 watts of output for wideband modes. So certainly a very interesting proposal, and we'll pop the link on this for you on the ICQ podcast webpage for you, so you can check out this proposal and see if there's anything you can do to support this if it's of interest to you. Right, now we head over to our features episode, which is our review of the Quansheng UV-K5 SDR radio. As always, hope you enjoy.
And now what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast. Hi guys, for this feature I wanted to talk about a new handy-talkie or walkie-talkie, depending which part of the world you live in. Now, there's always a lot of bad press about Chinese handy-talkies, but this one I think probably doesn't deserve it. Now, I'm probably late to the table on this one. However, having spoke to people in the other parts of the world other than the UK and the US, maybe some people are not aware of this. The radio I'm talking about is a Quansheng UV-K5, and mine has a brackets 8 after it. Now, so you're saying, well, do I need another 2 meter 70 sems handy talkie? Why would I want one? Well, this is an interesting little radio, and I've had more fun messing with it, as I'll tell you as we go on, and well worth the money. Now, the radio itself is really well built. It fits in your hand. It has really good audio. It allows you to listen to the VHF FM broadcast band. And in fairness, it wouldn't be uncomfortable to listen to it that if you were out and about on your own. So not a bad little radio as an ordinary FM broadcast radio. But going further on, looking at it, it does FM. It also does AM for the aircraft band. So, not a nice little idea. And I watched a YouTube video the other week of a gentleman doing some cyanide testing against a well-known brand, of which I actually have one of those radios, and this little Quansheng. And before you all say, well, the big brands are much better, one thing or another, this little Quansheng has got the latest chip in it. It is actually far better on receive than a radio that you would spend between £200 and £400 buying. Now, that starts to wake you up when you realise that technology is moving forward, and here we are with a radio. Now, traffic receive, it will receive from 18 megs, yes, you heard me right, 18 megs to 1.3 gigs. Phenomenal. But we'll come on to that in a while. The other thing is, what's the price of this? Well, the average sort of price, buying from one of the auction sites, is around £20, 20 UK pounds. Now, if I told you that I just bought a new battery for my Yaesu FT2 from a dealer in the UK, and it's cost me 3 times the price of one of these radios, I could actually have 3 of these radios for the same price as a battery I've just bought for one of my Yaesus. That, to me, starts to kick home, especially when it's got phenomenal performance on receive. Now, programming. Okay, if you look long and deep on the internet, you'll find the Quansheng programming software, and it's very, very usable. It's quite friendly to use, and in fairness, I'd see nothing wrong with it. However, most of us use Chirp for one thing and another. The Chirp programming software is available for the Quansheng, and and if you get the latest version, that is, and gives you the ability to just use one piece of programming software. Now, I've tested this with Windows. I've also tested it under Linux, and with Linux, you have to do one or two little things. Most are mentioned on the Chirp installation guide page on their website. However, just so that you don't fall foul, I'll run you through this quickly. You've got to add your user to a group called Dial Out. So if your username is Martin, you add that user to the Dial Out group. Without that, you don't get to connect to the TTY or the USB TTY devices. So it doesn't take long. It's a short command line, and there's lots of posts on the interweb to tell you how to do it. Second thing I'll tell you is it uses the same programming cable as a Baofeng UV-5R. So if you've got a Baofeng UV-5R programming cable, you don't have to go out and buy a new cable. And it can be locked to only work on certain frequencies. So you could say, I want the UK frequencies or the FCC frequencies, and one of the options is you can lock it and say ignore and don't use the other frequencies this lovely little radio is capable of looking at. So nice little radio, but what else? Why did I get so excited about it? I've told you nothing exciting about it yet until you get to the firmware. Now, once you get to the firmware, guys, it's up to you. If you brick this radio, I ain't buying you a new one. It's up to you whether you want to have a fiddle and a play. I've loaded lots of different firmwares that are available on the internet, and in fairness, I've had great fun playing with them and looking at them. When I bought mine originally, because I bought mine from a dealer at a rally, I paid a little bit too much for it. He'd already put in an upgraded software that allowed mine to transmit on 6 meters, 4 meters, 2 meters, 70 sems. But actually it would also transmit on the aircraft band, which I didn't like. So we removed that software. But there's a lot. As I say, various firmwares are available. There's firmwares that will give you programming or be able to use the radio between 18 megs and 1.3 gigs. Now, albeit down on the CB bands or the 6 meter band or the 4 meter band, they transmit very, very low milliwatts. However, they also don't have a low pass filter down there, so you've got to be sensible about it, guys. It's an interesting radio. I'd suggest you use it for listening on, and I'm going to be honest about it. There is a firmware upgrade one of the people are offering, and you can spot these on the internet, which allows it to receive upper sideband. So you've got a handy talkie for £20 receiving upper sideband. That to me was phenomenal. There's also a option where if you're interested in AM broadcasts and particularly airband, one of the firmwares has got an enhanced AM version. And in fairness, things like band scopes are really, really good. This radio can also do, out of the box, a cloning from one of these Quanshengs to another one over the air. So you don't have to connect a cable. You can program it over the air by putting one in send mode and one in receive, and it just goes across and sends it across. That, to me, is somebody thinking outside the box, and that's the initial software. Now, mine came with a drop-in charger, which is very nice. However, it also gives you a USB-C socket on the side, which allows you to charge this thing from USB-C, meaning that if you're travelling, you don't have to carry the big drop-in charger with you. So, all in all, an interesting little radio. Would I recommend it? Yes, I'm quite pleased with mine. But equally, I'm pleased with mine because I'm experimenting with it and playing with it and doing all sorts of other things with it, which is what our hobby's about, learning. But it's a lovely little software-defined radio that will obviously set the benchmark for a little while. Whereas a lot of people would have gone for a Quansheng UV-K5 SDR, nothing wrong with them in my opinion. Certainly on UHF they're very clean. This one, yeah, it's fairly clean, as clean as it needs to be, and in fairness, for the money, £20 UK average price, that's silly money. As I say, mine is a UV-K5 brackets 8, close brackets. The only difference in the brackets 8 I can see, and somebody may prove me wrong on this, is the 8 has a amber screen, whereas the straight UV-5K has a white screen, black and white screen. So, all in all, I think a lovely little radio. A lot you can do with it, very little money. And even if you don't do much with it, playing with some of these firmware, which you can download and write into this radio, great fun. However, buyer beware, I've blown over 12 different firmwares into mine and had no problems at all. If you manage to brick your radio, I'm sorry, I'm not buying you a new one. You take your own responsibility for that. But that's what our hobby's about. Good fun to just have a bit of a play. And that was the little device in operation sitting next to me, and I hadn't switched it off, getting the ident from GB3XP in the South London area. I hope that was of interest.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Well, everybody, I really hope you enjoyed today's feature on the Quansheng radio there that was picked up a few weeks ago. And certainly that's been an interesting toy for you to have a play with over the last few weeks. I know it's given you quite a lot of enjoyment from picking up from the rally we were at.
Yeah, it certainly did. And in fairness, I probably paid a little bit too much for it at the rally. But the amount of fun I've had just looking at different firmware, starting to understand things that these little handy talkies can do. Even though I don't really need another handy talkie, it's been well worth, in my opinion, the fun of playing with it. So, yeah. If you guys get as much fun having a look at one of these, fine. And in fairness, going forward, it's probably the new standard for low-priced 2m77s handy talkies.
Yeah, so if you need to suggest maybe something for a stocking filler for yourself for Christmas, or as I say, Santa put you on the naughty list, you didn't quite get what you were looking for, could be an interesting pick up there in the next couple of weeks and have a play with. So, as I say, really good fun there. Now, I know that you mentioned to me there's been some interesting contacts through the Digital Talk group recently with some of our colleagues in the Southern Hemisphere, and it'd be great for everybody to keep an eye on that Digital Talk group because, as I say, it's a very clever piece of technology connecting together all those wonderful digital groups. And as I say, do certainly get everybody to check it out, and not only could you chat to potentially your favourite ICQ podcast presenter, but as I say, the extremely intelligent and lovely listeners out there in the ether of the Digital Talk group.
Certainly is, Colin, and it's open 24 hours, and because the podcast listeners are all over the world, there's going to be times when the UK is going to be quiet, and others I see calls going through in the middle of the night for me. And fine, good on you guys. Use it. That's what it's there for. And I know that down the Southern Hemisphere, they use it a fair amount during the night. So good on it.
Yeah, so this is our last episode before the Christmas break, and our next episode will be released just before New Year. So we'd like to obviously take this opportunity to thank everybody for their support and good wishes throughout this year. And we obviously wish you the best for the season's greetings, happy Christmas, and as I say, even if you don't celebrate this time of year, we hope you take this time of year to spend time enjoying the hobby and maybe take some of the downtime to explore some of the projects, etc., that you mean to do. And it's a great time to thank all the donors that we've had throughout 2023 that help us pay our way and keep your ICQ podcast show advert free. And as I say, we really do appreciate all the monthly subscription donors and all the one-off donors, I say, throughout the year that have helped us out along the way. So we do appreciate you guys from there. Now, of course, all of our colleagues, to say, who have joined us throughout the year, but in particular those that have been part of today's show. So we'd like to thank Chris, Mike Zero Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin, Mike Zero Sierra Golf Lima, Frank Kilo 4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel, Bill Whiskey Charlie 3 Bravo, and Leslie Golf Zero Charlie India Bravo for taking part in the news roundtable with us. So thank you for joining us there. Right, well, I think that just about wraps up episode 419 of the ICQ Amateur Ham Radio podcast. Anything left to do now, as I say, is for yourself, is to make mum a cup of tea and find a mince pie. And for me, releasing this show from Berlin this weekend is to find my Mrs. B maybe a nice Glühwein and one of the very fine cakes and treats that are across the road in the Christmas market. So so we certainly both got jobs this weekend.
Yeah, certainly have, Colin. No problems at all. Well, I'm going to go and make your mum a cup of tea now. Find something nice and sit back and relax. So all that's left to me to do is say 73 to you and 73 to all our listeners. May your Christmas be very merry and a very happy new year from me.
Yeah, 73 is all Merry Christmas.